The night New York City decides to rain, it does so like a punishment. Not a soft rain. Not the kind that makes poets reach for their pens. This is the kind that hammers the pavement of Manhattan at 11 o'clock on a Friday, that sends umbrellas inside out, that forces even the most composed men in this city to walk a little faster than they would like. And Jung Kyung-min never walks fast. Not for weather. Not for anyone. He steps out of the black Escalade onto the wet sidewalk of the Upper East Side, buttoning the last button of his charcoal brioni overcoat without looking down. His driver holds an umbrella over him. He waves the driver away. He tilts his face up for just 1 second, lets the rain touch his cheek, then walks inside. This is a man who owns weather. Or at least, that is what his reputation says. 41 years old. 6 feet 11. The kind of bone structure that makes strangers stop and recalibrate their sense of what a human face is allowed to do. His hair is black, cut close on the sides, longer on top. Always slightly disheveled in a way that costs $300 to maintain. He speaks 4 languages with native fluency and 2 more with enough precision to conduct a business meeting or end a man's career. He runs what the federal government, in its most careful press releases, describes as an international import-export conglomerate with alleged ties to organized crime networks operating across the Pacific Rim. What the government means, what everyone in this city who matters already knows, is that Jung Kyung-min is the head of the Jung Syndicate, one of the most quietly powerful Korean crime organizations ever to establish itself on American soil. He does not look like what people imagine when they imagine that. He looks like the kind of man who would own a gallery, who would pour wine slowly and tell you exactly why the vintage matters. He hosts a television segment that airs on a premium food and culture network, a 15-minute piece that runs once a week, in which Kyung-min sits across from a chef or a sommelier or a producer of something rare and beautiful, and he asks them questions with the patience of a man who already knows the answers and simply wants to watch another person discover them. The segment is called Refined. 7 million viewers. Not one of them knows who he really is. He moves through the party, a fundraiser for something that does not matter, held in a penthouse that belongs to a man who owes Kyung-min a significant favor. With the ease of someone who has never once questioned whether he belonged in a room. He accepts a glass of champagne. He does not drink it. He moves. He nods. He makes 3 minutes of conversation with a senator's wife, 2 minutes with a hedge fund manager whose last name is on a hospital wing, and then he sees her. And everything, just for a moment, goes slightly wrong. She is standing near the window with the rain streaking down the glass behind her, and she is laughing at something the woman next to her has said. And it is the laugh that does it. Not because it is pretty, though it is. Because it is completely, catastrophically unselfconscious. In a room full of people performing themselves at the highest possible resolution, this woman is simply laughing. Her head tips back, her eyes close. Her whole body participates. She is wearing a burnt orange dress that has no business being as striking as it is, and her hair is natural, coiled and crowned and gorgeous, and she has not touched her champagne either, though for entirely different reasons. She is using the glass as a prop, tilting it toward the woman she is talking to as if offering a toast to whatever joke just detonated between them. Kyung-min watches her for 11 seconds. He knows it is 11 seconds because he counts them. It is a habit he developed years ago, in rooms where being caught staring could have consequences. Then he crosses the room. And here is the question this story wants to ask you, because it is important. And because the answer will determine everything that follows. What happens when a man who has spent his entire life being the most controlled person in every room he enters finally meets someone he cannot predict? If you have ever loved someone who made you feel like the floor was moving, someone who rewrote the rules of whatever game you thought you were playing, then stay close. because what happens next between Jong Kyung-min and Sydney Matthews is going to feel very, very familiar. And before we go further, if this story is already pulling at something in you, if you are already leaning in, please take 2 seconds right now to like this video, subscribe to Beth's Library if you have not already, and share this with someone who deserves a story this good. Every share helps this community grow, and this community is built for people who understand that the best love stories are never simple. Now, back to New York. Back to the rain. Back to the window. Her name is Sydney Matthews, 26 years old, from Atlanta originally, though she has spent the last 3 years in New York trying to figure out what that means. She works as an assistant buyer for a mid-size vintage clothing company in Brooklyn that is either about to make a great deal of money or collapse entirely, the kind of company that exists in permanent, exciting uncertainty. She is at this fundraiser because her friend Danielle dragged her here with the promise of free food and the possibility of networking. She has so far eaten 4 canapés and networked with no one. She is not impressed by this room, not because she is above it. Sydney Matthews is not a person who thinks she is above rooms. She is simply not interested in performing impressed. She finds the food mediocre, the art on the walls confused, and the conversation around her conducted almost entirely in the language of people reminding each other of their own importance. She does not know who Jong Kyung-min is when he approaches her. She knows he is attractive in a way that makes her go slightly still inside, the way you go still when something unexpected lands close to you. She knows his suit is extraordinary. She knows he is moving through this room as if gravity works differently for him. What she does not know is his name, his network, his net worth, or the particular quality of dangerous that clings to him like expensive cologne. "You haven't touched your drink," he says. She looks at him. She looks at her glass. She looks back at him. "Neither have you," she says. He almost smiles. Almost. "Mine is a performance. I hold it so people don't offer me another one. Mine is structural," she says. "The glass is holding up my whole left side. If I put it down, I might list." This time he does smile. It happens slowly, like a door opening in a building you were told was abandoned. "You don't know who I am," he says. It is not a question. It is an observation, and there is something in his voice when he says it. Something that sounds almost like relief. "No," she says. "Should I?" Most people in this room would say yes. "Then I'll keep not knowing," she says. "It's clearly doing something interesting for you." His name, when he gives it, lands in the conversation without the usual ceremony. He does not perform it. She files it away. Kyung-min. She does not search the room for other people's reactions to him. She does not check her phone. She simply continues talking to him, and it is this singular, complete attention directed at him without any trace of calculation, that makes the thing in his chest do something it has not done in a very long time. His phone buzzes 3 times in 20 minutes. He ignores it twice. Yet he checks it once, reads the message, puts it back in his pocket, and says nothing. Sydney watches him do this and does not ask. She is not the kind of woman who asks about buzzing phones at parties, but she notices. She notices everything. They talk for 40 minutes. He finds out she is from Atlanta. She finds out he hosts a television segment, which she has never seen, which he finds he does not mind. She tells him about the vintage company, the uncertainty, to the particular pleasure of touching a garment from 1962 and trying to understand the life it had before it reached her hands. He tells her about a restaurant in the West Village that does one thing perfectly: a single pork dish, unchanged since 1987. And that perfection of purpose is the most interesting thing he knows how to respect. When she leaves, Danielle has found the person she was supposed to network with, and it is time to go. Sydney gives him her number with the ease of someone who is not sure she should, but has decided to trust the instinct. He takes it with the ease of someone who always gets what he wants, but there is something different in the way his fingers close around the small piece of paper she has torn from the back of a receipt in her purse. Something almost careful. He calls her on a Tuesday. She is not waiting for the call, which is the first thing. She is in the back of the Brooklyn shop running a rack of 1970s silk blouses through a steamer when her phone rings and she sees an unknown number with a 212 prefix, and something in her stomach flickers. "I'm going somewhere for dinner tonight," he says without preamble, "and I'd like you to come." "That's not a question," she says. A pause. "You're right." Another pause. "Would you like to come to dinner with me tonight?" "Better," she says. "Where?" He takes her to a restaurant in Tribeca that she could not have found in any guide, the kind of place that does not need reviews because its clientele does not use them. The lighting is the amber of old photographs. The menu is in Korean and French. The sommelier appears before they have settled into their chairs. Sydney watches Kyung-min order, and she watches the sommelier's deference, and she begins to understand, in the way you understand the temperature of a room when you have been standing in it long enough, that this man is not simply wealthy. There is a quality to the way people move around him, just slightly adjusted, just slightly more cautious, that she has never seen around wealthy people. Wealthy people generate eagerness in the people who serve them. This man generates something quieter. Something more like respect that comes from a place you do not examine too closely. She says nothing about it. She asks him about Korea. Where in Korea? When he left? What he misses? He tells her about a market in Seoul, where his grandmother bought fish at 4 in the morning, and how the smell of that market, salt and ice and something living, is the most specific memory he owns. She tells him about her grandmother in Atlanta, who made food like it was an act of healing, who believed that a person's health could be tracked in what they were willing to eat. He listens with his full attention, not the performed attention of a man trying to charm a woman. The real thing. The listening of a person who is genuinely, unexpectedly interested. This is what undoes him, though he does not know it yet. Most of the women in Kyung-min's life have been like mirrors. They reflect what he offers, and they are beautiful in the reflecting. Sydney Matthews is not a mirror. She is a window. Something is always happening on the other side of her that he cannot quite see clearly, and the desire to see it is the most awake he has felt in years. What he does not know, what Sydney has not mentioned because there is no good place to mention it, is Michael. Michael Johnson, 24. A musician theoretically. In practice, a person who moves through the world on the certainty that everything will work out because things have mostly always worked out for Michael. And Sydney has been part of the working out for the last 2 years. They are not exactly together. They are not exactly apart. They exist in the particular purgatory of two people who care about each other but have never once asked whether they should. Michael left for Los Angeles 6 weeks ago for what he called an opportunity and what Sydney privately called a vanishing. He calls when he remembers. She picks up when she can stand to. The last conversation was 11 days ago and ended with both of them saying things they meant but phrased badly, and then saying goodnight in a way that meant nothing. She has not told Kyung-min any of this. Not because she is deceiving him. They have been on 3 dinners. There is nothing to deceive. But there is a particular weight that Michael's name carries when she thinks about it in the context of whatever this is with Kyung-min, and she has been carrying that weight quietly, in the way you carry something you are not yet sure how to put down. Kyung-min, for his part, has his own ghosts. Oh, Hye-rin is not a ghost exactly. She is a woman who exists with great specificity and intention in the corners of his life, a Korean businesswoman, elegant, older, who has known Kyung-min for 12 years and loved him for most of them in the calculated, clear-eyed way of a person who understands the limits of what he can offer and has made her peace with those limits. She calls him on Sunday mornings. He always answers. Their conversations are conducted in a language that has been refined over years into something efficient and honest and fundamentally incomplete. She knows who he is. She knows what he does. She has never asked him to be different. And he has never asked her to pretend she is not in love with him. And the arrangement has worked, because neither of them has ever wanted more than what the arrangement could give. Until now. Though he has not said this to her, he has not said it to anyone. He has barely said it to himself. On their fifth evening together, Kyung-min tells Sydney about the Paris trip. It is not Paris. In his adaptation of it, in the world he has built in this city, it is a trip to Seoul. A working trip connected to the television segment. 3 days shooting in the markets and restaurants of his home city. A production crew that will be there for 2 of those days and then leave, and the rest of the time would be his own. He has been going every year. This year, he says, looking at her across a table in a small Japanese place in the West Village, he would like her to come. Sydney looks at him for a long moment. "You want me to come to Seoul?" she says. "Yes. We've had dinner 5 times. I know. That's..." She stops. Recalibrates. "That's a very large ask for 5 dinners." "I know that too," he says. And then, in a voice that is quieter than anything she has heard from him yet, "I'm not good at smaller asks." She looks at him. She sees the thing underneath the composure. The thing that is not armor, exactly, but the shape of a man who has learned to live as if armor is the same as skin, and who is now, in this low light, in this small restaurant, very slightly unsure of that equation. "Let me think about it," she says. He nods. He does not push. And it is one of the things about him she has begun to trust. She calls Michael that night, not to ask permission, that is not how they work, and the thought of it makes her tired, but because she needs to hear his voice in the context of this decision. Michael picks up on the 4th ring, cheerful and slightly distracted, the sounds of Los Angeles behind him, something happening at a distance. She asks how he is. He is good. He is working on something. He asks how she is. She says she is fine. She does not mention Kyung-min. She does not mention Seoul. The conversation ends in the same way their conversations have been ending lately, in a kind of warmth that has gone slightly soft in the middle, like fruit that is still beautiful, but has begun to yield. After she hangs up, she sits with her phone in her lap for a very long time. She calls Kyung-min at 11:15. "I'll go," she says. Seoul is nothing like she expected and everything she should have prepared for. The city arrives at her like a sensory event. The scale of it, the vertical drama of it, the way old and new exist here not in opposition, but in a constant negotiation that makes New York's version of the same conversation look naive. The smells of the night market near Gwangjang hit her before she is properly adjusted to the time zone, and she stands in the middle of the crowd with her eyes wide and Kyung-min a half step behind her, watching her take it in. And something in his face does a thing she is not prepared for. He watches her like she is the city, like she is the thing he brought her here to see. They eat bindaeteok standing at a stall at 10 in the morning, and Kyung-min explains, without any of his usual measured distance, the particular significance of this food to him. How his mother made it on holidays, how the sound of it frying is the sound of every good morning he can remember from his childhood. Dawn and Sydney listens with her mouth still full and her eyes absolutely on his face, and he stops in the middle of the sentence because she is looking at him in a way no one has looked at him in a very long time. "What?" he says. "Nothing," she says. "Keep going." He keeps going. At night, after the production crew has wrapped and gone to their hotel, they walk. The Han River, the streets of Bukchon, the old village, the narrow stone alleys and the low tile roofs catching the last of the light. Kyung-min talks more than he has talked to any person in years, about his father, who was a hard man in the way of a man who loves fiercely but has never learned to show it without making it feel like something to earn. about leaving Seoul at 19, about the particular loneliness of power, the way the more you have of it, the smaller the circle of people who can be honest with you becomes. Mac about how he built something in New York that he is proud of in ways he cannot say publicly and ashamed of in ways he cannot say at all. Sydney listens. She asks questions at the right moments. She does not perform sympathy or discomfort. She simply receives what he gives her with the full steadiness of a person who is not frightened of complicated things. On the second night, sitting on the steps of a temple with the city spread below them in its million electric lights, she tells him about Michael. Not defensively, not as a confession. With the directness of a woman who has decided that if this is going to be something, it has to start from the truth. She tells him that it is unresolved, that she has been afraid to resolve it because resolution in either direction requires a clarity she has not been ready for. That she is telling him now because he has given her things in the last 3 days. True things. Difficult things. And she cannot take them and give him the edited version of herself in return. He is quiet for a long time when she finishes. Is it over? He asks. Not accusatory, not wounded, just clear. I think it has been for a while, she says. I just haven't let it be. He nods slowly. I have someone like that too, he says. And he tells her about Hirin. Not everything, but enough. The Sunday calls. The 12 years. And the arrangement that works because neither of them wants more. I think, he says, speaking carefully, that I have been telling myself that wanting nothing more was the same as being content, and I have recently become less certain of that. Sydney looks at him. Recently, she repeats. Recently, he says, and the edge of something, not quite a smile, not quite an admission, crosses his face. They do not kiss that night. They sit on the temple steps until the cold comes up from the stone, and the lights of Seoul blur slightly at the edges, and then they walk back through the old streets side by side, not touching, in the way of two people who are both aware of the precise charge in the distance between them. On the flight back to New York, Sydney sleeps and Kyungmin does not. He sits with his hands folded and the window dark and the hum of the engines around him, and he examines. With the methodical precision he brings to every significant problem, exactly what has happened to him. He has built his entire life on control, not control of others, though that too, but control of himself. The regulation of his own exposure. The careful management of what he allows to reach him, what he allows to matter, what he permits himself to need. He built this because need is leverage and leverage in his world is danger. He has watched men destroyed by what they loved. He made a decision, very young, that he would love strategically, that he would choose the kinds of attachments that could be bounded, that could be exited cleanly, that would not leave him standing in a room with his chest open. And then this woman fell asleep across the aisle from him in business class, with her mouth slightly open and her hand under her cheek, and he is sitting here at 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean calculating, for the first time in his adult life, on whether his plan is actually working or whether it has simply been quietly preventing him from living. When they land at JFK, it is raining again. New York has missed them. In the cab, Sydney's phone rings. She looks at the screen. Michael. She looks at Kyungmin. He meets her eyes and then looks at the window, not out of indifference but out of respect. The deliberate, careful respect of a man giving a person the room to make a choice. She answers the call. She does not say much. She listens for a moment. She says, quietly and without cruelty, the things that have needed to be said for longer than she has been ready to say them. She says them without theater, without anger, with the tired gentleness of someone finally setting down a bag they have been carrying too far. When she hangs up, she does not look at Kyungmin immediately. She looks at the rain on the window. She watches a droplet find its path down the glass. Then she says, I've been afraid that letting go of comfortable things means I'm reckless. And now, he says, Now I think staying with comfortable things past the point they're true is the recklessness. The cab moves through the tunnel. The lights flash through the windows in regular intervals like a heartbeat. Kyungmin reaches across and puts his hand over hers on the seat between them. He does not say anything. She turns her hand over and holds on. This is where the story should end neatly. This is where, in the version of events that gets told at dinner tables, the details smooth out and the two people find each other and the city accommodates them with a shaft of late light. But Kyungmin is not a man without consequences. The world he moves in does not pause for love stories. In the week after they return from Seoul, there are 3 meetings he cannot tell her about, 2 phone calls she is not permitted to witness, and 1 moment in his office on the 40th floor of a building in Midtown, where he sits behind his desk and looks at his own hands and asks himself whether it is even fair, whether it is even something he has the right to offer to bring someone like Sydney Matthews into the orbit of a life like his. He calls Hyrin on a Sunday. He tells her the truth, all of it, in the way of a man who has been honest with her for 12 years and cannot stop now. She is quiet for a long time. Then she says, in Korean, something that translates roughly to, "I have been waiting for you to want more than you were willing to take." Her voice is steady. He does not insult her by being surprised. He loved her, in his way. He tells her so. She says, she knows. The call ends with the kind of completeness that only comes between two people who have always been honest, even when honesty was hard. He calls Sydney after. She picks up on the second ring. "Are you free tonight?" he says. "I'm free tonight," she says. He takes her to the restaurant with the pork dish that has not changed since 1987. They sit in the back, at a table that the owner, a small, serious Korean man of about 70, who nods once at Kyungmin in the way of old and uncomplicated trust, reserves for him without being asked. The food comes. It is, as promised, perfect. Sydney eats with the same full-body attention she brings to everything, and Kyungmin watches her. And the thing in his chest that he has been measuring and managing for the last 6 weeks is not, he decides, something he is going to manage anymore. "I want to tell you something," he says. She puts down her fork. She gives him her full attention. "I have spent a very long time being very good at not needing anything," he says. I think the word is impressive at it. "And I have recently come to understand that I built all of that to protect something that was never actually in danger, because the danger was never the world." He pauses. The danger was this: a table, someone across it. The possibility of... He stops again. This is the most halting he has ever been in language, and he is aware of it, and he does not retreat from it. "I am not a safe choice," he says finally. "I want to be honest with you about that. The life I have is... it is complicated in ways that I cannot always explain. And you deserve to know that before you decide what you want." Sydney looks at him for a moment. "Kyungmin," she says, "I grew up in Atlanta. I have been navigating complicated for my entire life." A beat. "I'm not looking for safe. I'm looking for true." He looks at her. The city outside moves in its millions of intentions and its rain and its relentless ordinary miracle. And here, or in the back of a restaurant that has been doing one thing perfectly since before either of them was born, Jung Kyung-min, who controls weather, who does not walk fast, who has spent 41 years being the most composed person in every room, feels something in his chest open up like a window in spring. He reaches across the table. She takes his hand. Outside, New York City does what it always does. It keeps going, enormous and indifferent and secretly, underneath all that noise. Paying very close attention to what happens in the small spaces between people who finally decide to stop running from the one thing they cannot afford to lose. This is a love story. But it is also something more than that. It is the story of what happens when a man who has mastered everything except his own heart finally meets the woman who makes mastery feel beside the point. It is not finished. It is never finished. That is the whole point. And if this story moved something in you, if you felt the rain, if you felt that cab ride, if you have ever held someone's hand and felt the entire architecture of your careful life shift 2 degrees, then you already understand. You know why Beth's library exists. It exists for exactly this. Please like this video if it reached you, subscribe so you never miss a story, and share it with someone who is ready to feel something real. We are building something here, one story at a time, one feeling at a time, and every single one of you is why it keeps going. Until next time, stay close.